They're 21-year-olds who can make $200,000 a year straight out of college with a simple career decision, working 100 hours a week as an investment banker on Wall Street. But you'd be risking your life, literally. And sadly, just this year, a young investment banker at Bank of America died working consecutive 100-hour weeks. I also worked 100 hours a week as an investment banker, but after 2 years pivoted to something less demanding, working 80 hours a week for the next 14 years. In this video, I'll share what that experience was like, the trade-offs of a high-stress career, and ultimately, is it worth it? Now, the demand for these jobs will surprise you. B of A has 500,000 applicants for their investment banking analyst class. Now, when you're not cranking on PowerPoint at 2 in the morning or sleeping in a bathroom stall, these types of jobs give tons of opportunity for private equity, corporate finance, and hedge funds. And if you put your head down, suffer the consequences, save well, and invest well, it is easily one of the most lucrative careers out there. Here's my investment banking story, where I was an analyst at Broadview International, now part of Jefferies, doing middle market technology M&A. This is 2002, so I'm 22 years old, and I had been living at home, 14th Street, Avenue A, right by that Trader Joe's. And I'd been living at home to save money. And just to put this shit all in perspective, I had splurged on a TiVo so that I could record American Idol. And after I would come home from work at 1 o'clock in the morning, I needed to unwind and I would watch Ruben Studdard. I think this is the season after Kelly Clarkson. And I would come home and watch American Idol at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we would normally wake up at about 7:45 and kind of head to try to get to the office by 9. So there was a kind of start late culture. But this was the longest stretch. I don't think I think I had stayed awake for 2 straight nights. So I don't even know how you measure that. So maybe like I had worked 48 consecutive hours, something like that. I would sleep under my desk. So I had a cubicle. So I would roll up a sweatshirt and then sleep under my desk for 45 minutes, 2 hours. I don't even remember. And I remember coming home, it was probably 10 in the morning after the second all-nighter, and just seeing my mom, and I just burst into tears. And I was like, Mom, I cannot do this. And I think my parents were beside, they're like, why would anyone do this to themselves? Look, back then we weren't making $200,000. So if you just want a little context on inflation, we were getting salaries of $55,000, signing bonus, I believe $7,500. And then it was a bad year in investment. 2002 was a bad year because .com had just, worse than the .com crash. We were getting bonuses. I think the best person got 20,000 and the worst got 5,000 and got laid off. So, 15,000 bonus. So you're making $77,500 a year out of college. To put it in context though, sharing an apartment in New York City with roommates was $1,200 maybe. I think you could get an apartment for under $1,000 in Murray Hill or something. So just puts all the pricing in perspective. That was one of these memories that I have, was just like bursting in tears, and my mom being like, why are you doing this to yourself? And to be frank, I worked at a second tier investment bank that was called Broadview. It was kind of a boutique bank. It got gobbled up. So it's part of Jefferies now, and I was doing middle market technology M&A. So I would say probably I was working 80 hours a week, 6 days a week, coming home, probably like 1 in the morning, getting back to the office at 9 in the morning, Monday through Friday. Then on Saturdays, probably working 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 12 hours. So I don't know how that math adds up. And then these were BlackBerry days, so you're still kind of checking stuff through Citrix and so on. And that was, lighter. This was definitely a lighter workload than the B of A analyst. But again, at that point, the marginal hour starts to get kind of fishy. So, people often hear this life and they say, why weren't you guys more organized? Like, didn't you have some kind of system? Didn't you do planning? Didn't you plan your work weeks? Did you have meetings to, like, why does everything need to be a fire drill? And it's an interesting question. I think that at its core, investment banking is a client service business, right? If you're trying to get two companies to merge or one company to go public, that company is your client, right? And so when that company says jump, you say how high. And there's a pecking order, right? There's kind of the person who owns the relationship, which is the managing director. There's kind of the directors, VPs that really kind of oversee the work itself. And then there's the people doing the work, the analysts, the analysts and the associates. So the first thing is it's a client service. Why do you work so hard? It's a client service business. So you are constantly doing work, sending it to the client, and then the client sends it back, and then you do the work. And here's the crazy thing is that the client would give you you never knew exactly when their comments were coming, right? So there was actually a lot of sitting around in this job, but you could never leave, right? So it kind of owned your mind space. It's a crazy thing, right? You're always thinking, and this was before work from home was a thing. So you had to be in the office. I think you still need to be in the office. So the client sends you their comments at like basically before they go to bed, which could be anywhere from, their dinner time, so 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., right? They send you their comments, and the comments can be as stupid as make the font bigger on this slide. There's a typo here. Or it could be something like the model you have run, this assumption's broken. Rewrite the model. So what do these analysts do? Two things, Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint. And so you are either building, and you don't even start building the models right away. You're building the models, the financial models, the acquisition models, the share dilution models. You're looking at different comparison transactions, things like that, looking at a lot of financial statements. And then you take all of that and then you basically put it into PowerPoint to help to then present it to the clients, to the other bankers, and so on. And so there's this kind of that's what you do, right? And you might be in one industry, you're doing tech, or you're doing energy, and so on. And that is kind of the cycle of what you do. So there's always a fire drill. Now, Wall Street in general is a very reactive culture. They don't have Kanban boards, and they don't use a Trello or Asana. Back when I was working at Wall Street, it wasn't that long ago, a lot of the folks still printed out their emails and read them on the train ride home. Right? I don't even know. I mean, banks have teams now, but that's probably not until after the pandemic. So the work is very reactive. It's mundane in some regards, but it's also pretty challenging in other regards. If you've never built a financial model on two companies acquiring or merging and figuring out how you can extract cost savings and figuring out the dilution and figuring out, what the combined valuation might be, that's some pretty hardcore stuff. And at the same time, there's a lot of fix this font, fix this bullet point. The colors here look off. Make the logo look bigger. So what were the trade-offs then? So you basically don't have a life. Now, many people, if I've been watching industry, which is not investment banking, so they don't. I guess the Hari character dies at the beginning, but the main show the main kind of storylines of the HBO show industry is about sales and trading, where you don't have the crazy long hours. There, it's much more you're watching the market moves. But in industry, one of the characters dies because he's taking Adderall and maybe cocaine while he's at his desk to really impress his bosses, and the bosses are just pushing them work harder. But And if you have seen industry, there's this level of debauchery, this amount of sex and drugs. And look, that definitely existed. I've seen it. Sometimes I've partaken in it, but it was definitely more on the fringes than the main event. Um, and so you work. So Thursday nights, you would probably get out of the office at 10, and you might actually go straight to a bar and then just get fucking hammered. And then we would go to this bar called Don Hills, which had this amazing 80s party in, I guess, Tribeca or Soho West. And then we would go home at maybe 3. We would sleep until 7, so 4 hours, pound a ton of coffee, pound a ton of Gatorade, and then be at your desk at 9 a.m. on Friday, knowing that Fridays you probably got to leave a little bit earlier, maybe like 8 or 9 o'clock instead of 1 or 2 o'clock. Friday, same thing. You repeat, you go hard, and then you get to sleep in a little bit on Saturday, maybe get into the office at 10 and leave at 6. And then do some work on Sunday, go out super hard. So again, you go out super, super hard in on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And also, I think in the context of all of this is to remember that you are 21 years old. You are peak energy, peak motivation. Your body is quite forgiving, and we'll talk about some of the shit that comes back to haunt you, but your body's quite forgiving. You don't need that much sleep, although the conversation on sleep has changed between boomers and millennials. And you can just rebound quick. You don't have kids. Many folks were not in serious relationships, and if they were, you weren't even married. You had a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. And many people often ask me, how did your relationship suffer during that phase? And I think that it's definitely hard to maintain a serious relationship. Um, it's But you're 21, and so maybe you're not in the phase of life for serious relationships. Um, there is a huge, I think, what people love or like a lot about that type of work is that there's a ton of camaraderie, right? I mean, I don't want to use any analogies about collective suffering here, but it's well known, right, in Sebastian Junger's book Tribe, if a lot of people are going through the same struggle at the same time in a physically similar place, you develop a huge camaraderie. And I'm still friends with many, many folks, my peer group of that phase. Sleep, we talked about. There wasn't much of it. And then exercise was an interesting one. I was someone who always valued exercise. So I remember I had a pull-up bar. I had these push-up handles, and some kind of ab roller. And I would get home and I would do, I don't know, 50 to 100 push-ups, 100 crunches, sit-ups, and a bunch of pull-ups. And then on the weekends, I would go for a run, maybe hit the gym. Some of the offices have gyms, so you could go to the gym at that hour, like 6 p.m., 7 p.m. when you're waiting for the client to send you back stuff. So again, I think it's like anything, if it was important, and I say this to anyone, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a consultant, the things that are important to you will be important to you even when you are scarce of time, right? And so working out has always been something that's been important to me. And to this day, I would say, I'm 45. I would say I have probably worked out 5 days a week for 25 consecutive years, irrespective of career, world travel, unless being sick, right? So, I think sometimes people are like, oh, once I have less hours to work, then I'm going to start working out. It's like, no, you can own your actions. You can turn the volume up or down. And again, this was the bare minimum, doing push-ups and stuff in your bedroom before going to bed. So the other thing that that I wanted to call out on investment banking is really, and working 100 hours, it would be one thing if they told you, like, your 100 hours, it's, 8 to 2, 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. every night, every weekday. And then Saturdays is, 10 to 10, and Sundays is 8 to 4. But that's not the thing. You never know. You never know. You can always be called back into the office. And that is one of the worst ways to exist. And that's actually why I actually normally you do investment banking for 2 years, and then you go to business school, or you go to another private equity or hedge fund, or you get promoted. I actually left after 18 months because of this reason. And actually, this is the crazy one. So I told you about the schedule. So Friday night, we get out of work at 9 o'clock, and we'd go to this friend's house. We called it the Bat Cave. It was like 6 dudes living in a converted apartment in Murray Hill, and the Bat Cave had no lighting, and we would just pound Smirnoff Ice, and then we would go out. We'd go out till, since it was Saturday, we'd go out till like 3, 4 in the morning, and then something that's always been important to me, what a juxtaposition here, is volunteer work. And so I found this volunteer program that was on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. every Saturday. It was teaching STEM at a school in Harlem, through the program New York Cares. I did this program for every week for 7 years. I ran it for the last 3 or 4 years. I would go to this program. And if you think there's a time that is safe where you won't get called into work in investment banking, Saturday 9 a.m. is probably the best, the closest you can come. Sunday 9 a.m. would probably be better, but Saturday 9 a.m. is a close second. And I would go to this volunteer program, and I'd be called back into the office. And by the way, our office was in New Jersey at the time. So I had to hire a black car, call a black car, all this fucking bullshit. So that was, so the inability to have a protected hour to do volunteer work. Fuck. That was when I said to myself, I gotta get out of this. So that was actually what catalyzed me to leave investment banking after the 18 months and not stay in my full trajectory. I wanted to share a perspective. One of my friends, Matt Ting Com on Twitter, also did this track. He stepped out. He's now a DJ and a music producer and an internet entrepreneur. Shout out Matt, super fan of RadReads, amazing dude. And he said, one of the most difficult things about investment banking and working these 100-hour weeks is it forces you to fit lots of enjoyment and dopamine into very small periods of time, right? If you only have one free night on the weekend and it starts at 10, you want it to activate instantly. If you have one 5-day vacation a year, but the thing is, the brain doesn't work that way. You can't go from 100 miles an hour, grinding, to I'm going to be chill. I'm going to be a laid back guy. I'm going to be funny. I'm going to be loving. I'm going to be caring. Right. And he says in this tweet, it makes you very, very susceptible to vices. Right. Think about this. You're miserable. Let's say it's Friday night. You're miserable. You already started the day hungover and you've worked 16 hours and you're miserable during those 16 hours, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Right. And so the minute you get out of the tunnel, you want to turn on. You want it to be fucking awesome, right? Enter blow, pick any vice, right? You don't have time to just on-ramp onto enjoyment, because the minute, before you know it, you got to get back to that life. And that is a very, very unhealthy way to live, regardless of your age. And furthermore, it's very very hard to unlearn that, right? You kind of get acclimated to that. Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video. So I wanted to pivot now so I did that I worked 80 to 100 hours a week for the first 2 years of my career. I would say from age 25 to 30, and I met Lisa when I was 28, right? So from 25 to 30, I probably worked 80 hours. So I had left investment banking and I worked at a startup investment firm, fund of hedge funds, if you're familiar with that type of vehicle. And there I was working 80 hours a week. But there was a big difference is that the schedule was very fixed. I would get in at 8, I would leave at 8. And so that was 60. And then, there'd be one or 2 days when I would stay longer, client dinner or so on. And then I would work a decent chunk on the weekend. But the difference here was a lot of that was self-motivated, meaning I probably could have been an average, barely above average employee if I had stuck with the 60, maybe say 65 to accommodate for some of the, the few fire drills. But I wanted to be excellent at that job. And so I took that extra time to take initiative. So you could see right away, but it honestly felt like nothing. It felt so easy because I always knew that I could make a plan with a friend. Yes, I might get an email that I had to respond to, but I always knew that I could, that I could make plans. Right. And right there, that was such a game changer. And then kind of 30 to 35, when I was kind of hitting a level, I became a manager. I was hitting more of a level of success on Wall Street, this time at BlackRock. I definitely could have worked like 50 to 60. In fact, we had a company that was outside of, we were acquired by a company that was outside of New York City. So the acquiree didn't have that culture, that New York City culture of just fucking grinding. A lot of them had been married younger than their fellow New Yorkers. It was more diverse, gender diverse. So there were more younger parents, and people were just, people would work 10 hours. So there, if you were working 60, you were above, you were in the top 25%. And then I would say the extra, to get me to probably 75 hours, that extra 15 hours was either trying to be better at the job or networking. Right. And so then networking, that becomes a very different kind of work. Yes, I was out for dinner every single night. But I didn't have kids until the very end. It was fun. You drank a lot, but there was a lot more control. And so I think that's, to me, for me personally, that's a healthy progression. If you're not from these worlds, it's fucking batshit crazy. And I think, now as an entrepreneur, I probably spend 35 hours working like in front of a computer, recording podcasts and so on. But I'm still probably thinking or doing work adjacent things for another 15 hours a week, maybe 20. So you're still up to 55 hours a week. So it's an interesting thing where you talk to anyone who's worked 100 hours a week with that volatility, and they'll tell you 60 hours a week is like a walk in the park. Like 60 hours when when it starts and when it ends and you can't get called back is a walk in the park. Is that a good? We'll get to the section. Is it good or not? that's harder to ascertain, right? But that's definitely something that's worth considering. Like if you work in those jobs and you're in your youth, your young adultness, your threshold for your capacity to work will always be significantly in excess of your peers who haven't done that. Now that's up to you to decide if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So now I want to tackle the question, is it worth it? And I actually posed this question on Twitter, and I got an amazing response from someone who asked to remain anonymous. They're in the world of family offices, so not 100, but still high work hours. And so I'm actually just gonna read what they wrote and then insert my commentary. So this person said, your spending will go up. You'll pay any amount of money to buy back a moment of rest. So suddenly you're paying for a house cleaner, more Ubers to get around, quick takeout, work lunches, fancy restaurants, because you deserve it. And it's one of the few ways that high income professionals spend time together. Expensive vacations to escape the pain. This is an insidious trap, because with the higher spending, you'll start thinking to yourself, well, I need to make this money to afford my lifestyle. And then you risk getting stuck on the treadmill. That was the point number one. My commentary on that, I think it's spot on. I think especially in places like New York, where everyone is in that world. You're like, oh, who wants to go to a prefix dinner, right? It's $250 for sushi, omakase, whatever. And it's just, you don't even blink, and then it kind of becomes a part of your thing. But this thing that like, I am so beat down by work that I can pay money to alleviate my pain, I think is actually, like this person said, a very insidious trap. It's actually a very shitty way to live. But to the outside world, and even to yourself, it can feel very luxurious. It's like, I deserve this 4 seasons vacation. I can afford it. And then you're like, well, I'm the kind of person that takes vacations at the 4 season. And then when you look at all the peers doing it as well, it becomes much, much harder to break free from. All right, number 2 on is it worth it? You lose your ability to think clearly about your life. When you're that worn down, you stop making rational decisions about what you want out of life long term. You keep plodding ahead and start to forget all the other things outside of work that used to be important to you. My commentary, spot on. It is so, with these types of jobs, it's hard to even gather a moment to work out. So to be like, is this what I want to be doing for the next 10 years? What makes me happy? Or a much more tricky one is like, also, this is the phase of life when marriage starts to get tough, right? You kind of like the 10-year honeymoon of, hey, we just got married. Hey, we just have young kids. And you're like, oh, we've been married for 10 years. A lot of the bad habits are catching up with us. You can't even see it, right? You're gasping. And even any time you think you have a free moment, it's punctuated by someone emailing you, telling you that they need you. Number 3, you lose your ability to think creatively. Yes, your work suffers, but more importantly, your humanity suffers. You stop solving problems in your own life with creativity and try to solve them instead with money. Ooh, this is a derivative of the last one. And again, injecting my own commentary, I think that the life that I have created for us, my family, requires and still continues to require immense amounts of creativity. And to be creative, your soul needs to be nourished. You need to be rested. You need to be able to let your mind wander. You need to be able to graze on ideas outside of the thing that your boss and your clients are asking you to read, right? Number 4, you lose your ability to relax and experience joy. Everything's survival mode. Even basic things that used to be enjoyable, like a nice walk to the grocery store on Sunday with your partner to cook dinner together, become a frantic struggle to get through as fast as possible. Everything in your life becomes an item to just get through, right? And so that is really kind of the time scarcity. The lack of freedom, and how these jobs, everything, it's a little bit like the Vice example. You have such little time to enjoy anything that you have to just keep this machine going and going and going. And I'll tell you, I have so much appreciation for time freedom. One of my favorite sayings is true wealth is never feeling rushed. And god dang, I still feel rushed from time to time, but I cannot imagine going back to that, just everything, and again, what this person says is it starts with work, but then it bleeds into Sunday night dinner. Okay. Number 5, openness and extroversion. When all your energy goes into work, you don't have enough left to give to the important people in your life. You give your best self to work and bring home a shell to your partner. Over the years, it takes a toll on your friendships, your romantic relationships, your nice, well-rounded life that you used to live. And here's the real trap. If you do it for long enough, the rest of your life will decay and you'll have nothing to run back to. You'll start thinking to yourself, what's the point of stopping? I have no hobbies. I have no friends. I have no other interests. I don't even know what I would do with all that free time. At least if I stay here, I know I'll make money. The company protects me. I'm safe here. Whew. There's a very kind of there's a nihilism to this, but it's true. And it's also why a lot of people with this life stick with peers with that life, because they're the only ones that can actually understand. But then you're still in this constant, because it's so competitive, it's so materialistic, you're in this constant fucking rat race, right? And lastly, this is just a powerful, thoughtful email. When and if you do stop, you might be surprised to look up and find that life hasn't just been waiting there for you. Life has moved on. Your friends don't text you because you said no for the last 10 times they tried. You and your partner have forgotten how to spend time together. You haven't had a deep, meaningful conversation in years, and you're not sure what you have in common anymore. You remember that you used to play the guitar, read the classics, or do a trail run or mountain bike, but those are just a distant memory. Now they feel like childish pursuits for an adult who's supposed to be working. An old coach of mine calls this total work, where somehow work seeps into our lives and everything becomes in service of work, right? And why does that happen? That's for another episode, but there's the identity question. There's the survival question. There's the self-worth question. There's the competitiveness question. There's the enough question. There's the absence of creativity and thinking through what you want for your life, not what others have done around you. Okay, juicy part now. Is it worth it? Now, I'm going to give my opinion. I will say the people that I've polled, about 50-50 say it's worth it. And I'll get back to the 50-50. One thing that I've noticed, and so as I've shared before, because of these sacrifices, I have been able, at 35, I had saved $4.3 million in liquid assets. Didn't own a home. So you take that 4.3 and rule of 70, right? If the market gives you 7% a year, every decade it doubles, right? And by the way, there was a lot of cash at the beginning there because I was very nervous, and I just wish I'd stayed fully invested, because I've always been fully invested except for that period right when I left. So you can see the power of compounding, right? So at 20, let's just use 4 million. At 4 million, at 35, at 45, it's 8. At 55, it's 16. At 65, it's 32. At 75, it's 64. At 85, it's 128. Now, that did not play out because I held too much cash, and I am using some of my savings by going on margin. So I'm not selling anything, but by going on margin, I live off my savings without having to sell stocks, pay capital gains tax, and so on and so forth. But what that means, regardless, and look, I don't want to have $128 million at 85. I couldn't give a fuck. But what that means is that wealth creation is taken care of in my mind, and Lisa is on board with this. So then from 35 onwards just becomes letting that grow wherever it grows. Like, again, it's not going to grow to 128, but it's going to grow. And then maintaining your living expenses, right? And here's where you can work more and spend more and more. You can work less and spend less. You can work less, spend more, and draw a little bit from that. Again, you'd have to think about the compounding effect of that. But if you don't care about the 128, then you're probably going to be fine. Plus, we're more of a die with zero. Like, we just don't want to give our kids that much. We don't want to give them much money once they leave the house as adults. So that track, and a big part of that was because of the work hours. So in some regards, I feel, and this is something I've come to appreciate with 10 years out of the industry, is like, I'm glad I did that. And look, there were costs that were paid. I've shared, I have high blood pressure, male pattern baldness, type 2 diabetes. That's probably more genetic, pre-diabetes. And I've grind through all of my teeth from like intense night grinding. So I have paid a health price for that. I don't think I've paid a relationship price with that. Many of my friends are still in finance. I have a very healthy relationship with my wife, who met me in part of that period. I never had to raise kids with those hours, so I would definitely be a worse, not as good father. And funny thing on the health stuff is I'm actually able to bring down a lot of these just through holistic measures, mostly like sleep, completely changing your diet, meditation, so on, things that take a lot of time. So those were the trade-offs, right? You have this kind of weird formula that kind of works with the math. I'm still like pinch myself something. I'm like, and we live in an expensive cost of living place. The math would be even more bonkers if we lived in a lower cost of living city, which we never will, because we like big expensive cities, and a lot of our friends are in these cities. So the track is powerful. I think that in the early days, it's a phenomenal launching pad. Some of the pads have incrementally better lifestyles, but still very demanding. And some of them, it's a good launching pad to just a lot of careers. Being an investment banker at a top tier investment bank, it's very similar to having a undergrad degree from an Ivy League school. It's very well recognized. It immediately signals a few things. You're very hardworking. You're probably smart. You're probably resourceful. And just a lot of employers want that and will gravitate towards that, right? And, a lot of investment bankers leave and go into corporate finance, where the hours are more like 50 hours a week, right? And you're not pulling any all-nighters. You make a lot less money, but you couldn't have gotten that job without having gone through this. So that is something that you don't want to downplay. There's something also weird when I think about this, is it's like, if you start working in a hellish environment when you're 21, everything going forward is less hellish by definition. And it is a hellish environment. The physical demands, the emotional demands, the people are assholes. A lot of them are. The clients are demanding. So it sets a very, very very, very distorted baseline, but then everything after gets better. Right? Now, I'm not going to tell you whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? I think it really depends on the perspective you have going about these careers, these perspective you have on work, on money, and so on. But it definitely, I don't regret it. I would do it again. I'm glad that I caught the health stuff in advance, because here's where it gets really dangerous, is that it becomes very hard to leave, right? This is a classic golden handcuff industry with the actual handcuffs like deferred comp and RSUs and restricted stock units and all that, but also societally, right? Because the peer group is quite insular. So it's actually very hard to leave. Trust me, I know. I coach a lot of people that are trying to leave. And so that's how you have to think about the decision. And I'll leave you with one question. And this can apply to any demanding career, not just the ones where you work 100 hours a week. And the question is, do you want to own the successful version of that career? So if you're in the early days, if you're in your 20s, look at the folks in their 40s. Is that the life that you want? Some people will say yes, and some people will say no. And being able to execute on that plan is the way to do it. Thanks.